So again, if we look back, and in the MS field, we've been very fortunate in the last generation that if we compare ourselves from the last generation to people before us, they didn't have the tools that we have, and particularly the imaging tools, the MRI, which allowed us to see the disease, and also the technology for making therapy, especially recombinant molecules. If we look back 2 generations ago, the idea in MS was you knew that some people would have a rather benign course. So why don't you wait to see what happens? And only if they're in trouble would you start introducing the therapies. Now, I think what we've clearly learned is that the systemic immune system coming to the brain is initiating the relapses that cause much of the disability, and that we've learned that early initiation of therapy is a key aspect of what we have to do. Then I think what we've also realized that at some point, the systemic therapy is not sufficient, and whether we're going to have to direct therapies that whatever these mechanisms are within the brain, that we are going to have to target those activities if we're going to shut down the ongoing disease that we currently call secondary progressive or progressive forms of MS. So I think one of the biggest issues is how we've been talking about how events outside the brain, the immune system outside the brain, is getting into the brain and contributing the brain events occurring within the brain compartment. I think one of the major issues is, are they linked? So that is the whole disease triggered by the initial events outside the central nervous system. And if we could know what are those triggers, and there's a lot of interest now, for example, in EB virus changing the immune system, that are we going to, if we shut down or changed the events outside the brain, and we did it early enough, would we shut down the entire spectrum? The other is that, is there something about the brain that is personalized? In other words, the genetic makeup of your brain cells are such, or the environment that you've been exposed to has changed the properties of the central nervous system environment, that in some people that an initial inflammation occurs as a one-time event and shuts down, and in others it sets off this cascade. So I think the challenge is, the main issue are the linkage, what has changed in the central nervous system environment. And I think another important issue is, in addition to that major destructive component of the disease, are there more subtle or almost sublethal events? Why do people with MS, even if they're walking around, why don't they feel perfectly well? Or why do they complain that they may have brain fog, if you will? What are the subtle changes in the nervous system? And the final component, I would say, is that some of these principles of changes of inflammation in the brain in MS, are they shared with other diseases? We should look across diseases. Are there shared principles that we could apply both for protection and repair?